I have selected a couple of approaches to our Parsha. Ksav Sofer treats Tazria and Metzora together. And of course, since we're only reading Parshas Tazria this week, so we'll look at some of his comments in Parshas Tazria. The interesting thing is, which many of the Meforshim mention, Rashi as well, is that the subject of our Parsha, Isha ki Tazria v'yalda zachar, a woman who conceives and bears a child, bears a male child. This passage, this subject, follows the discussion of the status of various animals, kosher and what we call kosher and non-kosher species, which the Torah calls Tameim and Tahorim. And actually, that's a fairly extended passage, longer than our passage in the beginning of our Parsha. So maybe let's start with Rashi's comments. So we're at the beginning of Parashat Tazria. You can find it at the beginning of chapter 12 in Vayikra, in Leviticus, in the Art Scroll, Stone Chumash's page 608. Isha ki Tazria, so Rashi says, Amar Rabbi Simlai, ki shem sheyitziraso shel adam achar kol behema chaya v'of b'maaseh bereishis, just as the formation of man, the creation or the formation, we could say, of man is after the description of bringing into existence the animals and the other creatures, the birds as well, in the process of creation. Similarly, the law, that is to say, the status of a person vis-a-vis a status of Tuma and Tahara, also is presented in the Torah after that of the animals. In other words, Rashi is commenting on the sequence, firstly the juxtaposition, but also the sequence in that the attention that the Torah provides for the status of animals seems to precede sequentially that of man himself. And Rashi says, well, according to the Medrash, actually we find that that follows the pattern of the creation of man himself, that the animals were all created on each of the, or several of the days of creation, and Adam only came into existence on the sixth day. So the Medrash goes on to say that why is it that man was created last? So the Medrash says that the reason is, excuse me, that if a person is worthy, if man himself, let's say, lives up to his potential, realizes the purpose for which he's brought into this world, the reason for which he was created in the first place, if he fulfills that role and that destiny, then we say that you are created last, so that when you enter the world, it will be like a king or a guest of honor who arrives at a banquet after the caterer has been there, and the flower person, and the interior designer, and the wine stewards, and when everything is prepared, the orchestra after, and the lighting after, everything is ready and prepared, and maybe the guests are already assembled as well, then the king or the guest of honor arrives. And the alternative might be for him to have to wait around for hours for the whole banquet to be assembled. So of course it's greater honor for the king if he comes in last. That's what we say about man if he is worthy. But if he's unworthy, then we say in the pithy language of the Medrash, Yitush kadamcha, a mosquito was here before you. You are the least, you are Yarud, you are, so to speak, deserving of the last position in the process of creation. Even a gnat or a mosquito is here before you. So Ksav Sofer says that the Torah here is hinting to something similar as well, meaning the fact that the animals are described in considerable detail, identifying a large number of different animals, establishing the criterion by which we can identify an animal as tahor or tameh. And then finally, we have the law relating to a person, the process, the sort of designation of tuma and tahara. Says Ksav Sofer, although he doesn't actually quote Chovan Salvavos, I've mentioned in the past that he does quote Chavos Havos quite a lot. Here, he says an idea which is found in Chavos Havos. He doesn't mention him by name. He says, actually, if you think about it, man in many ways is weaker than most animals. Not only in terms of strength, which of course some of the larger animals are stronger than a human being, but not only in that regard, but in terms of the like resistance to stress or to heat or to cold or to water. Man is more vulnerable. Man is more susceptible to various types of circumstances that can imperil his health and even his life. Moreover, Chavos Havos explains that a person who is born is completely helpless, completely dependent on his mother or those who care for him or her, and that remains the case for many, many months and even years. Whereas in the animal kingdom, not only smaller animals that are very quickly self-sufficient, but even larger animals, excuse me, are able to walk and to eventually hunt and to fend for themselves at a very young age. I remember years ago in the early days of the internet, there was a lot of excitement because a zoo in Cincinnati, if I remember correctly, was going to broadcast live on the internet the birth of a giraffe. They had a pregnant giraffe, and they realized that she was going to give birth, whatever it was. They couldn't say exactly when, but it was anticipated. And they decided that they would broadcast it. I don't know if I saw it on live, probably not. I don't know if I saw it at all, truthfully, but it was a source of great fascination to be able to see a giraffe giving birth. But the amazing thing is that this, I'm not sure what one calls the young of a giraffe. I'm not sure what's called a calf, perhaps a calf. And anyway, was able to walk, I think, within minutes of being born. A human infant, cannot walk for months and months, even to roll over, even to care for itself in the most minimal way. So the point is, says Ksav Sofer, that a person, a human being, is indeed weaker than an animal. The greatness of a human being, of course, is in his soul, in his spirit, in his mind. And in that regard, of course, man is completely, totally superior to animals. But unfortunately, as we know, man can use those qualities to become worse than animals, can become more rapacious and more damaging, more violent, and more harmful than any animal. So Ksav Sofer says that this is the meaning also of what it says in Pirkei Avos, in chapter 4, Mishnah 8. Hamachalel es haTorah gufa muchulel al habrios, which says firstly in the positive, one who honors the Torah, he is honored by people, and one who denigrates the Torah or desecrates the Torah, hamachalel es haTorah gufa muchulel al habrios. So he is regarded as unworthy or undeserving by people. So Ksav Sofer says that it says gufa mechubad or gufa mechulal, his body, because it refers to the physical status of a person. And this, again, relates to our subject, in which the animals, which are sort of subordinate and preparatory to the arrival of man, their Torah, tahor, tamne, is described before that of man. Moreover, he says that from the laws of the animals which are kosher for consumption and not kosher for consumption, the Torah then proceeds to talk about a woman who gives birth, and this is the Torah of the Ba'alei Chaim, and then Torah Sa'adam, the Torah of a person. So he says that this is the, sorry, trying to get here in my copy of the Sofer. The person who is unworthy, like the Medrash says, that if he is unworthy, then we say, well, a gnat preceded you in this world. So says Ksav Sofer, someone who desecrates the Torah, who does not conduct his life in accordance with the values and with the potential that the Torah provides for him, gufo mechulal mikulam, he is more demeaned than all of those animals, because, as we said before, they are by nature like strong and resistant to illness, not to every type of illness, but I'm saying that, animals generally don't require, air conditioning, or they don't require heating, or they don't require the benefit of a blanket or clothing. In some extreme cases, perhaps they do, or maybe they are, it will contribute to their good health or something like that. But by and large, those are not required by animals, but people do require that, and that alludes to the fact that man is more vulnerable and potentially, let's say, only deserving of a subordinate position to the animals. But that all depends on whether a person lives up to his calling and to his potential as provided by human nature, by the human condition. And as we've said, that could be for the good or for the better. So this is one approach to the juxtaposition of the ma'achalos asuros, of the animals which are kosher and not kosher, and then the status of a person when he is tameh, when he is tahor, and the laws that follow. By the way, it's not only in the case of the woman who gives birth, but also it refers to the tsaras and refers to other forms of ritual purity and impurity, which the Torah describes in this parsha and subsequently in the book of Vayikra. So Ksav Sofer also presents another approach, another perspective, starting with the same medrash, that just as a person's formation, man, Adam, was formed after that of the animals, so similarly, the Torah, the law of the human being, is related after the Torah describes that of the animals in detail. So he says, of course, man is the purpose of creation. He's the pinnacle of creation. But in order to reach his potential, in order for man to be worthy of that designation, like we said before, like the guest of honor for whom all of the prior visitors to the banquet hall are there in preparation for his arrival, in order for man to be worthy of that, he requires self-control. So again, this is a variation of what we just mentioned. Previously, we said in a more generic way, person who lives by the Torah, who is motivated, or who appreciates the spiritual potential within him, who lives his life in an ethical and moral fashion, in a humane fashion, a person who aspires to a relationship with the Creator. So that is in a more generic way. I'm sure that's true. But then in a further separate analysis, Ksav Sofer, which I'm sure he would have presented in a different year, because this commentary of Ksav Sofer is a collection which he compiled of his presentations. Actually was in the yeshiva on Friday nights over the course of a number of years. So this probably was another approach, variation on the theme from a different year. He says, in order for man to achieve his destiny, his purpose, in order for him to achieve his we have the psychological term self-actualization, as Abraham Maslow said famously, he needs self-control. He needs self-control. He needs to tame the animal within. Says the Ksav Sofer that the manifestation of that capacity of self-control, that's what we've called our little discussion tonight, under control. In order for a person to achieve his destiny, in order for a person to realize his great potential, in order for him to live his life in accordance with the values which he himself espouses, requires self-control. Says Ksav Sofer, self-control is necessary and is manifest, or perhaps its absence is manifest, in the arena of food, of eating. how many of us, myself among them, eat with less attentiveness and less discernment? Perhaps we eat more than we should, more than we need to eat to preserve good health. In fact, sometimes eating is a contributor to the opposite of good health. But beyond that general observation, of course, from the Torah point of view, from the content of last week's parasha, we have a whole list of animals, also aquatic creatures, also fowl that are kosher and that are not kosher, and that requires self-control. He says that when it comes to the laws of kashrus, there is an arena where self-control is necessary. I once had an occasion when I discovered, or I had an illustration of this principle. Some of you who've been with us over the months or years even have heard this story from me before, but it illustrates exactly this idea. Years ago, this goes back probably 25 years or more than 25 years. I had a student who used to come to a beginner service that I led in the West End when we lived in that area. And on one occasion, that was on a Shabbos morning, on one occasion, I invited him home for lunch. It was just a spontaneous invitation. And he said, yeah, he's happy to come. He thanked me for the invitation. On the way home, he said to me, by the way, what is Ruthie serving for lunch? And I said, I'm not exactly sure what the menu is. But as I said to him, and I've said to many others before and since, no one has yet gone away hungry from our Shabbos table. I don't think you'll be the first. So I said, why do you ask? So he said, well, I, for the last number of years, I've become a vegetarian. So I said to him, well, Ruthie was not expecting a vegetarian for lunch, but never fear, I'm sure there'll be food to eat. You won't go hungry. So he said, actually, I don't really want to be a vegetarian anymore. So I said, then, you can eat all the kosher food that's on our table. Why not? He said, well, and this is the nub of it. He said, I feel that having undertaken to be a vegetarian, it is like a commitment to myself. It's almost like a vow, and I don't want to betray my commitment. So I said to him, well, if you don't want to betray your commitment, then you can uphold your commitment and you can be a vegetarian. He said to me, actually, I feel that I don't need to be a vegetarian anymore. I realize now that I became a vegetarian because a few years ago, I thought to myself, I don't want to lead my life like a lower, primate with abandon, eating whatever comes my way. I need to adhere, I need to establish for myself a set of principles that is more, I would say, he didn't say exalted, but is more demanding, more rigorous. I feel as if I need to impose some discipline and some discernment in my life. But now that I've begun to come to your beginner service and I've become more involved Jewish, I've become more committed and more knowledgeable and more motivated to lead a Jewish life, I feel as if I don't need the vegetarian regiment anymore. And actually, I don't want it. I realize that a kosher diet is a much more authentic and a more meaningful form of self-control and discipline than the vegetarian, which is essentially just on a whim. And therefore, actually, the food, which is not vegetarian, but it's good kosher food, I desire it, I crave it, and I want to ditch the vegetarianism. And actually, he was concerned that perhaps it had the status of a vow. And I said to him, it could be that it does. And we arranged to do Hataras Nadarim for him. But the point is that this was, to me, a very excellent, a very practical example of how eating is an arena for self-control, or perhaps the lack of it. Says Eksav Sofer, this is why the Torah says the laws of the kosher and non-kosher species, some of which are widely eaten, in different parts of the world, meaning some of those non-kosher animals are widely consumed, and the Jewish person knows that he's not allowed to. Not only that, but again, as you know, an animal that dies of natural causes, or an animal that's mauled by a predator, even though the flesh may be edible and there's no biological impediment to it, but it's not kosher. It has to only be stored in a particular way, as you very well know. So it requires self-control. And says Iksav Sofer, the Torah therefore goes from self-control in the arena of eating, and from there to self-control in the area of sexual relations, because that's our Parsha, Isha ki Tazria, a woman who conceives and bears a child. So the way that she bears the child, of course, is through the sexual union. And says Iksav Sofer in a comment which is no revelation in the sense that we all recognize that intuitively, that is a very potent arena that demands self-control. He says something further along those, and therefore the Torah speaks of the kosher and non-kosher species, and from there goes on to talk about a woman who bears a child, and it says she is temeya for 7 days. If it's a boy, she's temeya for 14 days if it's a girl. And the Torah here uses the word nida as well, which of course alludes to the regiment that the Torah discusses later on of a woman who, in the course of her adult life, is Tameya at certain times of the month, and she must immerse in the mikveh, as we know, and that represents an area that requires self-control on the part of both partners. Says Iksav Sofer, that's why we can understand that the Torah says, first we establish the need for self-control regarding what you eat, and then from there, if a person achieves that, he can and he should apply that same ability to exercise self-control in the matter of interpersonal relations. And he says, if a person does not desist from eating animals which are not kosher, he will not have the ability to withstand the desire for intimate relations with a woman who is perhaps even his wife, but nevertheless she's not permissible to him, and she's not permissible to him, and he is not permissible to her during certain times of her status. He says that it's the sequence or the more basic to a more advanced level regard is first the animal self-control regarding eating, and then in the matter of personal intimacy. And I would add, now he says what he does in terms of a spiritual influence, that a person who eats food which is not kosher, it dulls, it deadens his spiritual sensitivity, and I'm not refuting that, but that's an assertion which perhaps is difficult to test empirically. But I will observe that it's quite uncommon, I would say even rare, to find a couple who are delinquent or who don't exercise any concern for kosher standards, who nevertheless adhere to the Nida regimen. I'm sure there are such cases, but they are certainly rare. It's much more common to find those who, how can I put it? The adherence to the laws of Nida are, you might say, a more advanced stage of Jewish commitment than kosher and non-kosher food. And he says, Iksav Sofer suggests, that's why the Torah arranges them in this sequence. And he says, this is what the Medrash means, that if a person does not cultivate self-control in the realm of eating, of food, then he won't be able to adhere to the laws of Nida. And I would like to add in the following way, which is my own insight, and if you don't find it convincing, then you don't have to buy into it. Machalos asuros, avoiding food which is not kosher, is essentially in the realm of sur meira, avoiding that which is forbidden. If a person is in a place where there's limited kosher food and he only has food which is not kosher or may not be kosher, the temptation to compromise one's principles can be great. But essentially, the laws of kosher consumption are in the category of sur meira, of desisting, of resisting the temptation to do something or to eat something which is wrong, which is not permitted according to Torah law. The laws of nida, of course, there is that element of self-control, but there's also an element of aseh tov. There's an element not just of sur meira, but an element of aseh tov, of positivity. There's an element of cultivating a relationship which is based on self-control, which is based on mutual respect, respecting the personal space of each partner as appropriate. And of course, in addition to the fact that, as the Torah says in our Parsha, a woman who conceives and bears a child, in addition to the realization of the procreation and the mitzvah of procreation. In addition to that, there's also the way in which the intimate aspect of marriage promotes the intimate relationship between the couple. It helps them to become one. As the Torah says, they will unite as one. And therefore, when it comes to the sur meira, of course, the sur meira is the basis, is the foundation. So the Torah mentions to us, and the Torah establishes the need for self-control regarding what you eat. From there, the Torah says, if you've achieved that, now you can exercise a form of self-control in an arena which is not only desisting from that which is forbidden, but also promotes the embrace of that which is meritorious, that which is beneficial, that which advances and enhances the relationship between a husband and wife. But it must be done, again, within the parameters that the Torah establishes. And this, says Ksav Sofer, is the meaning of the sequence, or the, as I say, the order of the ma'achalos asuros, about the behemoths, the animals which are tamei and tochor, and then torasa shel Adam. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. And as I said at the beginning, Ksav Sofer treats Tazria and Metzora together, and actually doesn't go into a lot of detail. So these two approaches both derive from his analysis of the beginning of the Parsha, and as I said, the juxtaposition in accordance with Rashi's comments. So thank you to everyone for listening. Next week, we're going to do something special, Ksav Sofer, on the Haggadah. So I'm going to share with you some ideas which I have found both in his comments in the book of Shmos, as well as he does have a separate commentary on the Haggadah, and hopefully we'll have a chance to look at a few of his insights into Haggadah Shel Pesach. That's going to be next Thursday night. Next Wednesday night, on the same link at the same time, we're going to have a pre-Pesach seminar. Your questions answered. We'll do some practical halachic matters in terms of Pesach preparation. That will be on Wednesday night. So that will be from 8 to 9. That will be a full hour on Wednesday night. There will be time for questions as well, if you like, at that time. If you want, we can have some questions now as well. Got a couple of minutes still. So thank you to everyone. I wish you Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbos.